diabetes and just completely transformed his life, and is now an international speaker, a behavior and nutrition expert. He's been featured on Forbes, Men's Health Magazine, and Psych Today. So, he's getting the word out there on, how to transform your life from, I know a lot of people out there are struggling, and sometimes it might seem pretty bleak. Seems like, you can't get out of a rut that you might be in. And I think Adam's going to have a lot of inspiration and just, great information to share with you guys today. And so we're going to talk about, really our self-perception and how that affects everything really in our life. If you're familiar with epigenetics, the way that we think and behave and act, our choices have a large impact on, our genetic expression, but as well as just our overall outcomes in life. And so Adam, again, is a great person to be sharing, just the proof of how this all works. And so let's bring him in here. Adam, what is up, my friend? Thanks for being
Hey
here.
man, how are you, man? Thank you for the wonderful intro there. I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation with you. And I think what I'm most passionate about is kind of helping people like rewrite the story on what these things that we think about when we think about depression, anxiety, addiction, when we think about the psychological and biological struggles of life. I think that as a society and as a culture, we have a really powerful story that has been told enough times and with enough authority that we have all decided that that's what's actually taking place. Especially with things like addiction, depression, and anxiety, and also things like chronic disease. But I think we've done a really good job over the last 10, 15 years of really starting to rewrite what those things are. But when it comes to depression, anxiety, and addiction, we're still stuck in 1950s. We're still stuck in the 1930s. We're still stuck in this belief that there's something psychologically and biologically gone terribly wrong, and that's what these things are. But when you sit with people who are struggling with depression, anxiety, and addiction, and when you listen to them tell you what's going on, what you quickly realize that what they are dealing with isn't that story. And so why is that? Why is that an issue? I think it's an issue because the majority of the programming that is designed to serve these people is designed to meet the needs of the story and not what's actually taking place.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that totally resonates. I mean, and I just know from personal experience as well that, the story that we have about ourselves, that we tell ourselves, that we continually repeat in our minds about who we are and, what we're capable of, it can either be an empowering, motivating thing, or it can put
Right.
you into like basically a prison that you're at your own,
Oh
creation.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because you'll confirm you'll affirm it to yourself with
Yes.
every possible example that looks enough like that story. That's all the affirmation that you need that that story is actually taking place. But I think when I look at my journey through my struggles with depression, with anxiety, certainly with substance use disorder, from both food and a chemical dependency perspective, um, anybody could have looked at my story and said, "Oh, well, here it is. These are genetic diseases. This is a psychological problem. This is a lack of willpower, a lack of discipline, and that's why you are where you are. And therefore, the solution is medication. The solution is abstinence. The solution is restriction. The solution is overexertion. And do that well enough with enough, grit and determination for the rest of your life, and see how long you can maintain that. And then hopefully over time, your life will get better. And it wasn't always like that. I grew up, I had, an amazing childhood. I had friends. I have a, identical twin brother. I have a younger sister, and grew up in Texas, rode my bike to and from school. And, from the outside perspective, it was kind of like upper middle class upbringing. Everyone would have been, oh, this kid, it's great. Because I always had a sunny disposition. Like I was always, trying to put on a good show. But I had a really difficult relationship with myself that started at a very young age, and it came from it came from a place of love, and I really think it came from a place of my parents wanting to care for me, but it was done so with a lot of criticism. My parents were very hypercritical of myself, physically, and to me it felt like bullying. To me it felt like, I don't know why you can't be what we want you to be. Why can't you just be what we want you to be? And it was difficult because you're 10 years old, you're 11 years old. You're eating the foods your parents bought for you.
Right.
It's like
Yeah.
these are the foods. How could, when I eat these foods in our house that you bought, how could it be wrong when I do it? But when you
Yes.
do it, it's right. When is it right for me? And when is it not right for me? When am I going to do it and not feel like I'm being insulted or made fun of or whatever? And so I really developed a very adversarial relationship with food and with my body, because I would look at my dad, and my dad looked like Captain America. I mean, he was a marathoner, he was a basketball player. I mean, he was amazingly fit, and it still is to this day, 71 years old. But man, my dad was the same way with himself, verbally, out loud, in front of me, criticizing his body, criticizing his weight, criticizing other people. Just he had this thing about it. And my dad has suffered some serious trauma in his life. My dad lost his dad to cancer. When my dad was young, he lost his dad to cancer. He would lose his mom in an accident. He lost his sister
Mm.
to heart failure. So my dad is very, very protective of people that he loves, and what he knows and what he's experienced in his life is that it's not unusual to lose people you love to health conditions. Not unusual. Not for him, it's not.
Yeah.
And so you better be aware, you better watch out, you better make sure that that person you love isn't adding a little too much extra weight or doing too many things that can cost them their health, right? This is a defense mechanism. But to a 10-year-old, it doesn't look like that, because I haven't seen anybody that I know and love pass away early, but he sure had. And so for him, it was his way of saying, I love you and I'm afraid. But when I'm 10 years old and I don't know that, it looks very, very difficult. And it felt very difficult. And I also got diagnosed with ADHD at a young age. And in the very, kind of early 90s way, where they take you to a doctor, and that doctor's there in very blunt terms says, your son has this condition, and we got to medicate it, because not, these aren't the exact words, but this is what I hear. That, okay, here I was brought to this doctor by my parents for the sole intention of this doctor finding something or not finding something wrong with me. And before I left, they found something wrong with me. And then this doctor told my parents that in order for me to not be broken, I had to medicate myself daily. And it would not be a good thing for me to leave the house unless I was medicated, because this person, as I am, will not be an acceptable person to the world around you. And so, man, I just kept getting these little pieces of this story that was building up as the years would go on. Every now and then I was going to be told there's something else about you that didn't work. And so by the time I was about to finish middle school, I was really excited. I had fallen in love with theater and drama. And I think you could make a story about that if you wanted to, that I really liked to hide in the characters of other people,
Mm.
because then I could be in front of everyone, but not myself, and people would applause. They would look how great he is, because if I could hide myself and still be worthy of applause, it's something. And I auditioned for this incredible high school in Houston called the High School for the Performing and Visual Arts. You actually have to audition to get into this school. Very difficult. And I audition and I get in. And then my dad says, guess what? We're going to move to Austin, Texas. You're not going to go to that school.
Mm.
And look, I'm not saying this in a way that my dad was like proud of this, that he didn't get to. In fact, it was very hard. He knew how badly I wanted to do it. But I was at that 13, 14-year-old age, probably 14, 15-year-old age, where I was beginning to really rebel against my parents. So for me, I really held that against him.
Mm.
I made that him something that he did to me, which is not true. And I recognize that now. And so I get taken, the whole family moves to Austin. And this is late 90s. There's no real advocacy around bullying then. I was an awkward kid. I was a theater geek, right? I go into this big Texas football high school, and I got bullied mercilessly every single day. Physical bullying, emotional bullying, verbal bullying. So much so that, in fact, halfway through my freshman year, when my parents would drop me off at school, the assistant principals would have to get their eyes on me to make sure that I was going to make it into the school safely.
Hmm.
And so, what I want everyone to understand, or I hope what everyone understands, is that let me explain to you what it felt like for me in my life at that time. I would wake up into a body that for the last 5 years, I had been convinced every single day was not a safe, secure, or hopeful place to be. I would be in the presence of parents who were and still are the most incredible parents in the world, but didn't always feel like a safe, secure, and hopeful place to be. Then I would go to a school that didn't feel like a safe, secure, or hopeful place to be. And I always had the sense that tomorrow was going to be equally difficult and potentially worse. Now, that is the appropriate breeding grounds for depression and anxiety. That is the appropriate psychological response that I should have been having. And I did have it. I started to feel incredibly depressed. I started to feel incredibly anxious. What I want people to think of depression far less as a chemical imbalance. Is really not what it is. But rather think of it as a form of grief for your life not feeling as it should. And I want you to think of anxiety as an alarm bell. It's a signal that arises that lets you know that your future, something about tomorrow doesn't feel safe for you. In fact, it feels very unsafe. It doesn't make sense. And what that anxiety signal is telling you to do is figure out how to defend against this future that doesn't feel like a safe place to be. How can I fix this? How can I get it to be so that I can make sense of it, so that it's someplace I'd like to be a part of? And when I do think about it, I'm not afraid of it. And I remember my prescription from Ritalin, I had been put on Ritalin in middle school, switched to Adderall. And, as soon as the bullies in my school found out I was on Adderall, all of a sudden I started getting invited to parties. And all of a sudden I started to be, feel a lot less afraid of being in school because all of a sudden they didn't beat me up anymore. In fact, they started to act a lot like friends. It wasn't really friendship, but man, it looked enough like belonging that it was attractive. And so I became that guy that would go to parties and give my Adderall to everybody. And in fact, I remember the first time I used Adderall as a recreational drug. And I remember the moment that that high dose of the medication took effect. I was a kid who was afraid all the time. I was shy all the time. I didn't feel like I had any right to be a part of anybody's group. And with ease and repeatability, I was given unbelievable confidence. Oh my gosh, that's attractive. People started to like me with ease and repeatability. That's attractive. I was able to lose weight with ease and repeatability. That's attractive. I started to engage in my schoolwork in a way that made my dad seem to be proud of me. Plus, I was losing weight. My dad seemed to be proud of me. Plus, I wasn't complaining about school anymore. My dad seemed to be proud of me with ease and repeatability. That's attractive. What I want people to recognize is that addiction is far less about the chemical hooks in the substance. It's more about how attractive of a solution it offers you to difficult things in your life that you have never been able to solve ever. What I want you to recognize is that if you were me, your life felt like mine, and your life looked like mine, and you were to use like I did, what you would notice is that that use looks almost exactly like self-care. It feels almost exactly like self-care. And that's what addiction is, misguided self-care. Addiction is about not wanting to be present in your life because your life is too painful a place to be. And the substance that you bond with, the addictive bond that you create, is around whatever behavior it is, whether that's food, sex, gambling, alcohol, opiates, stimulants, whatever it is, whatever gives you the greatest ease, the greatest whatever pacifies the passage of time with the greatest ease and repeatability. That's what you're going to bond to. That's what you're going to become addicted to. And that's what I grabbed a hold of. I grabbed a hold of substance use because it seemed to offer me the life that I thought I always wanted. And then it didn't. By the time I was in college, I ended up having to drop out because my whole life had revolved around substance use. By the time I was 30, I was a full-blown criminal drug addict on the streets, stealing from people, buying and selling drugs, doctor shopping, forging prescriptions, treating my family like garbage, multiple substances, stimulants, opiates, fast food. I was 2 weeks away from being homeless. I weighed nearly 350 pounds by the time I was 30 years old. I had erectile dysfunction for reasons I didn't understand. I had been practicing self-harm for about a year, where I would hit myself as hard as I could in front of the mirror, shouting horrible things to myself in an attempt to hate myself and my life enough. I had been battling suicidal thoughts for 6 months. And, life really hurt. Life hurt in every single sense of the word, physically, spiritually, emotionally. And I lived every single day uh, where life was the most painful thing it had ever been, and in full confidence that tomorrow was certainly going to be worse. And when you live there long enough, eventually tomorrow is not somewhere you want to be a part of. And so on August 21st of 2012, I tried to end my life by suicide. I grabbed a handful of pills, I threw them down my throat, and I didn't write a note. And in fact, the majority of the people who try to suicide don't write a note. And I'd been battling substance use for 10 years. I'd had some minor overdoses, but this felt distinctly different. And I can remember sitting on my couch, feeling this very odd sensation starting to build. And I tried to stand up, and my entire right side of my body cramped. It felt like I got stabbed in the right side with a hot knife. And I buckled forward, and as I tried to stop myself from falling, all my vision just goes completely black. And I'm going to tell you that the feeling that I had in that moment, and I'm not talking about the physical description that I just laid out for you. I mean, the feeling that I had, I was completely alone in a hoarder's-like apartment, entirely severed from everything and everyone that had ever made life meaningful for me. Not because I didn't want them to be there, or that they didn't want them to be with me, or they didn't want to be with me, but because I had been such a difficult person. I was very angry and entitled and mean. I just couldn't figure it out. I didn't understand how in the world could what was once the greatest solution in my life become the most overwhelming problem I'd ever faced. And whenever anyone would try to point it out, I would get angry at them because they didn't know what my life was like before I used, and they don't know what it felt like for that brief 5 years when it really worked for me. And it did work. And my life was great. And so I'm just let me figure this thing out. I don't want to do life without it because I know what it feels like when I don't have anything. I know what it feels like when I have no drugs, and you can't tell me that that's a solution. You can't tell me that not using is good, because I know how hard my life felt when I didn't. And, so many people would ask me, God, Adam, why didn't you just reach out to somebody? Why didn't you just ask for help? Why didn't you tell them everything that was going on with you? And I think it really comes down to this idea that, the the willingness to be alive depends on having loving, meaningful threads of connection that give you the experience that life is something that you want to meaningfully be a part of. And when the majority of those loving and meaningful threads of connection have been severed, and you're holding on by just one single thread, that one thing that makes life something that you value. And that for me was my family. God, what if I went to them and I showed them everything? What if I told them who I really was, and then they didn't want me anymore? I don't know if I could have tolerated what that would have felt like. And I think that's the thing that keeps people from asking for help, is that is such an extraordinary effort to do that. And, I woke up on the floor of my apartment several hours later in a puddle of vomit and a pile of fast food garbage, surrounded by empty pill bottles. Now, look, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know what it feels like to die, but I do know what it feels like to believe that you're dying with a life full of regret. And that is a terrifying place. I never want to be there again. So that's when I picked up the phone. I called my parents and I asked for help. I was able to check into a treatment facility a few weeks later. I was diagnosed with advanced type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, erectile dysfunction, a whole host of psychological conditions. I was put on a cabinet's worth of medication. And I was told, all these horrible things about my next 5 to 10 years: loss of sight, loss of hearing, blindness, loss of sight, loss of hearing, amputation, cardiac events like heart attack, stroke, and I'll always be overweight, that all these things were genetic. There's nothing I could do about it. And that the only way my life would ever get better is if I just stopped using drugs. And I thought to myself, that is the worst advice I have ever heard in my life. You painted a picture about a future that is far more terrifying than anything I had ever imagined. And you're saying you're telling me that it is certainty that I'm headed there. What urgency now do I have to do anything good for myself? If no matter what I do, that's my future, if anything, I should double down, right? I thought to myself, and this didn't just come to me. I had to spend some time on it, but if I really want to do this thing well, if this is something I want to be a part of, if I want to live, if I want this life, what I need to do is reverse engineer the experience of aliveness. What I want to do is become the architect of a life that would feel so safe, so secure, and so hopeful that use would no longer be necessary. And I needed to figure that out. I didn't know anything about depression, anxiety, or addiction at that time, but I had been inspired by a man named Rip Esselstyn, who is the author of the Plant Strong books and part of the Forks Over Knives movies and executive producer of the Game Changers. And I said, well, you know what? This sounds crazy. I wasn't really interested in a plant-based diet, didn't really like greens, but man, what if I could just run this experiment? What if I could just design an environment that looked so much like the things he was talking about, live there long enough and see what was possible? Just give my body the opportunity to demonstrate what my future might look like if I lived here long enough. If I was there for 90 days, I could get a real sense of what 1 year might look like. And if it looked like a good place to be, well, then I might be motivated to live there for the rest of that year. I moved into a sober living facility, and I tell people all the time, I just immediately installed a plant-based environment in that kitchen for myself. I made it really simple, oats in the morning with fruit, rice and bean bowls for lunch, rice and bean bowls for dinner, snacked on as much fruit as I wanted. Didn't matter. I could eat fruit all day long if I wanted to. I remember there were days I ate 9 apples a day, right? And I just, it was this remarkable experience. I tell you, it felt like I had spent my whole life believing that my body was my adversary. That my job every day was to get up every single day and outcompete a body that I wish I didn't have. Outcompete a body whose entire purpose was to make me gain weight, make me not feel good, make me not look good, make me hate myself through exertion, through restriction. But I had a conversation with my sober living mentor, and he asked me what it felt like when I decided to attempt suicide. And then he asked me a question, why do you think you didn't die? And I remember saying to him, I guess my body didn't let me die. And when my ears heard those words, because I said it out loud, when you say things out loud, your ears hear sound. It's not the same thing as thinking inside of your head. And whenever, remember, if you have affirmations that you say to yourself, you got to say them out loud. The minute I heard that sound, it was as if that entire story got rewritten. What if the only reason I survived 10 years of substance use disorder, 10 years of fast food disorder, 10 years of self-hatred, 10 years of self-harm, a suicide attempt is because my body is so much my ally. My body is so on my side that it has been fighting for me since the day I was born. What if my body's entire purpose for existence is to make sure I make it one more day every single day? If that's the truth, and I do believe that it is for everybody, then my job is not to restrict from this incredible ally that I have. It is to become a caretaker. This is a term that I adopted from a good friend of mine, Tara Kemp. What if I was a caretaker for a body whose entire job is to allow me to keep living? Well, in that case, I am very actively choosing to move my body with purpose, to eat plants, to go to my therapy as an act of service, not as an act of competition against what's wrong with me, but as an act of service of what has always been right with me. 4 months, my diabetes, my heart disease, my erectile dysfunction were completely reversed. I lost about 150 pounds in the first year, got off all of my psych meds. I've been medication free, disease free, and sober for 11 years. I've truly fallen in love with the behaviors that have allowed me to get to this point. I've never thought this was possible. In fact, if you were to go back 11 years today and said, what do you hope to get out of recovery? I'd be like, gosh, man, just make this thing not suck. Just like, I want to wake up one day and just have life be tolerable. That would be great, right? But the idea that I got here would never have crossed my mind. And the only reason I got here is because I wasn't trying to get here. I was trying to fall in love with the behaviors, with the environment, with the social environment, who are the people that look enough like the life that I want. If I could fall in love with that, then who knows what's possible, right? And so, it's been an incredible journey.
Wow. Yeah, that is an incredible story. And I mean, I think a lot of people can resonate with a lot of things that you said, even if they weren't, in the same situation, but just overcoming a lot of those challenges.
Yeah.
And, one thing that popped in my mind as you were, talking was how it's not only the perception, our self-perception, but the perception that we have of others and
Mm-hmm.
their actions when we might take something, because as you were saying, your parents, your dad, they weren't intentionally wanting to make
Uh,
you feel bad about yourself, but the way that we can interpret some of the things that other people do, whether it's correct or not, it will impact us dramatically. It
oh
can.
yeah.
So
My dad has been unknowingly, I didn't know this until, I was unfortunately until I was in my 30s, but my dad, if I had known this, my dad would have been my best friend my whole life.
yeah,
My dad is my mom and my dad are my number one fans. They would drop everything and anything for me if needed. I mean, I feel, I'm very regretful. Like people, they say, oh, you shouldn't regret things you did in your past. Bullshit. I am so regretful that I lost time with them. And because I regret it, it lets me know that that is a loving and meaningful bond that when threatened, now I will fight like hell for it, right?
yeah, yeah,
It is those loving and meaningful bonds in your life. This is why, people ask me, Adam, when you got started, where did you do these things because you're afraid of all the things that might happen to you? Did you do it because you're afraid of diabetes or heart disease? No, I wasn't afraid of those things. What I was afraid of was what I might lose if I don't go a different direction. I don't think people are motivated by negative consequences. Negative consequences let us know that there's something truly meaningful, loving, and irreplaceable in your life that is being threatened. And if threatened enough, you're gonna do something about it, right? So you'll end up, starting a workout routine or changing your diet or going to therapy or doing all the things. Those things, they don't happen because something bad is going on. They happen because if that bad thing continues, that special, irreplaceable, loving thing or things in your life could be gone. You're doing it as an act of protection, as an act of service for what it is that gives you the experience of feeling meaningfully alive, right? Why else would you do it?
yeah,
No one cares for their diabetes. They only care for what you care about. What you care about are the things that diabetes might threaten. So do it because you love the idea of being 80 years old and running around with your grandkids, or do it because you want to in 1 year you want to go climb Kilimanjaro. It doesn't matter, whatever it is to you, it can be whatever you want it to be, as long as as long as it is truly meaningful.
yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I mean, everything that you just shared could, that we could just wrap it up there. That was incredible
No,
and,
no,
and so much great
no.
information. But um, so typically, yeah, we kind of on the show, kind of the format, we just bring up like three main points, like three
Yeah,
takeaways or three examples, and again, you shared
yeah,
so much right there already.
yeah.
um do you have like what would be
Yeah,
for like a takeaway? What's like the
sure.
one thing, we can go
So
back and forth, and I'll
people
make
like to
mine brief so you can. Keep
Yeah,
going.
so one of the things I really like to talk about is a topic called evolutionary psychology. I really went in deep into understanding evolutionary psychology as a way to get myself out of a rut,
Mm.
right? So everyone wants to believe that they are the reason why they can't stop the drinking and the drugging, or the reason why they can't stop the fast food, the reason why all those things, even though they know they want to, and even though they know what else to do, right? So it's one thing to know you don't want to eat cheeseburgers. It's another to know that instead of eating cheeseburgers, I want to eat rice and beans, or I want to eat mame sapote, or I want to do whatever it is, right? So that's great. Now you know what you want to replace it with. And so you wake up the next day and you're like, all right, here we go. Breakfast time, right? Papaya, mango, oats. And you go to the kitchen and you just don't want to do it. Like, what the heck is going on? How can it not simply be a matter of intellect and will? Why, if I know what to do, is it so damn difficult to do it? And that is a thing that leaves people in a belief that they are weak, that they have no moral compass, that they have no grit, no determination, they're not disciplined, and it's nonsense. This is completely untrue. You actually have a motivational and psychological architecture that is compelling you towards behavior that it truly thinks and feels are increasing your likelihood of survival. And that architecture can be described as a guidance system. And that guidance system is driven by a very wonderful neurotransmitter called dopamine. Now, dopamine is a buzzword today. A lot of people misunderstand it. It's not just a pleasure chemical, and it is not something to avoid. Dopamine can't be avoided, right? But dopamine is a reward pleasure chemical, meaning it's not a neurotransmitter that gives us the excited euphoria of pleasure, but it gives us a unique pleasure that lets us know that whatever we have done seems to have statistically increased our likelihood of survival. Now, remember, you don't have a single longevity instinct. You only have survival instincts. Your survival does not care about you getting to 90. It only cares about you getting to tomorrow. So what that means is if the environment that you're in is messed with enough, if it is shifted too far away from what is representative of your behavior, your natural behavior, and your natural history, your survival instincts can become misguided. They can be compelled into behaviors that look like a really good thing to do when in fact they can be harmful to you in 30 years, but it doesn't care about 30 years. How is this taking place? Well, let's see how it works really well. Let's say that you and I were to go travel back in time 50,000 years pre-agriculture, right?
Mhm.
And like pre any kind of adjusted agriculture. This is like tribal stuff, okay?
Sure.
50,000 years ago, we're in a tribal village, you and me, there's about 100 other tribe members. And for whatever reason, the tribal elders come up to us and say, hey, guys, guess what? You have a job today. Your job is to go into that unexplored area of wilderness and find new kinds of food for us. But I want you to get the best ones for the tribes. Can you do that? And we, of course, because we're seeking status, right? We want to be esteemed amongst the village because the more esteem we have, the more things people will do for us. Of course, we say yes, but we don't have Google. We don't have maps. We have no way of understanding what the best choices of food out there are. And so we have to be efficient. There has to be something that helps us figure out what's the right move to make. Because what we're about to do is an incredibly specific task. We are going out into a very, very specific environment. This is a scarce environment. It means that there's not a lot of food out there, and whatever is there, if it's gone, it's gone. It's also competitive because we are not the only species of animals that are looking for those foods. That also makes it dangerous because we don't know what other organisms might harm us. It's also expensive because it takes a lot of time and energy to do this. So we have a scarce, competitive, dangerous, and expensive environment. So if we're not efficient, we're going to fail. So how do we know how to be efficient? Well, we would go out into this wilderness. We come into a clearing. For the sake of this story, these two food plants are going to be existing next to each other. There's a blueberry bush and there's a plantain tree, and they're right in the middle of this clearing. Now, the way that our motivational system works is that it's driven by a tripartite motivational system that is pleasure seeking, pain avoidance, and energy conservation. So we're seeking pleasure through food or sex. And we're trying to get the most pleasure we can for the least amount of pain and the least amount of energy. Because if we do that, we win in a scarce, competitive, dangerous environment. And so we see that there's two brightly colored plants. There's blue and there's yellow that indicates calories that are safe for us, fantastic. Now, the blueberries are technically the first choice we're going to be attracted to for a very specific reason. They're closer to the ground. Costs us less time and energy to get them, and we bite into it. There's like a few calories per bite here. And so for every calorie per bite, there's a lift in our dopamine circuitry. And as there's a lift in our dopamine circuitry, we get a sense this might be a good thing to do. And I'm fully committed to these blueberries. I'm gathering them up. And you look over to the right and you notice there's a significant number of plantains that have fallen. And you grab one of them, you break it open, you bite into it, and there's 7 times as many calories per bite. And so the lift in your dopamine circuitry is 7 times higher. And you go, oh my gosh, Adam, put those blueberries down. There's not a question in my mind. This is the better choice. I know exactly this. In fact, you're getting these really strong feelings that are compelling you to do this. It's very hard for you to not want to get more and more plantains. Every feeling that you have is compelling you towards something that is biologically successful. And so we've been able to figure it out with ease and repeatability. We've figured out what's the right choice to make. When we bring it back to the village, way to go, guys. Good job. That's fantastic. This is great. Now we know that those are over there and that the bananas, when time is pressed, the plantains are the right choice. Fantastic. Now you and I are going to fast forward to the modern day environment. And what we're going to notice is that there's been a phenomenal shift in the caloric environment to where now we have designed foods that have far more calories per bite than have ever existed in human history. We have combinations of macronutrients that have never existed in human history. There's not a single food in nature that's high salt, high fat, and high sugar at the same time. In fact, it's very hard to find a food in nature that's the combination of 2 of them. So we have foods that are higher in calories per bite and combinations of macronutrients in greater concentration than have ever existed in human history. We have ease and access to those foods at levels greater than ever seen in human history. We have repeatability of action that's greater than has ever been in human history, and your guidance system has no understanding that this shift has occurred. It is still operating under the assumption that we're still in that scarce, competitive, dangerous environment. And so every instinct in you is trying to get the greatest amount of pleasure for the least amount of pain and the least amount of energy. But in the modern environment, that guidance system is spun 180 degrees around, and you are compelled to doing things that you think and feel are very, very successful, and in fact are self-destructive. And you'll actually get to a point where you notice yourself getting sick, but you can't stop doing the thing. And you think it's because there's something wrong with you. Well, what I want you to understand is that the reason why you feel stuck isn't because you're biologically or psychologically weak. This is not an indication of your biology or psychology gone wrong. What is happening is an indication of your biology and psychology responding appropriately to environments gone terribly wrong. This is a caloric environment gone terribly wrong. This is a social environment gone terribly wrong. This is a physical environment gone terribly wrong. Every instinct in you is trying to get the most for the least. But in this environment, that looks like a good thing to do, and in fact, it's self-destructive. That's never happened. So how do you get out of it, right? How are you going to get out of this thing? Well, it actually takes extraordinary effort. You have to go through a process of what we would call recovery, right? So this is where you have to be willing to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You have to design an environment that looks appropriate to your natural history and your natural behavior. You have to take ownership of the home that you have, reorganize it to look more like a mostly plant-based, or if you could do it, entirely plant-based diet. Then you've got to reorganize your social environment. Your social environment should look enough like the life that you want, right? They don't have to eat exactly the way that you do, but the intention around eating has to be the same, right? They don't have to do the exact kind of exercises that you do, but the intention around movement has to be the same. They don't have to have the same job and aspirations and purpose that you do, but the intention around it has to be the same. And the way that they think and care for you has to look enough like the way you would think and care for them, or you're going to have to explain yourself and your actions far more often than you want, and you're going to feel alone in a crowd of people. That's a terrible experience, right? So what I tell people all the time is if you really want to do well, instead of going into your current environment and every single day with grit and determination, trying to outcompete an environment that has been designed really well to get you to where you are right now, if you want to go a different direction, you need to make your environment look like the life you want. You need to make your environment look like your goals. I'll give you an example of how this is with a story that Doug Lisle, who is in my opinion, the leading evolutionary psychologist who wrote the book, The Pleasure Trap, which is essentially what I just described to everybody. He says, if you go out at night and you leave your porch light on, what you're going to notice is that there are moths and they're attracted to the light. And the reason why they're attracted to the light is because they're actually designed by nature to use the brightest lights in the sky or celestial objects for navigation. But when the brightest light in the sky is now your porch light, their guidance system gets fooled and misled, and it hits the light, it flutters down, hits it again, hits it again, hits it again, and then it dies. And you're going to stand on the porch and you're going to observe this and you're going to witness it and you're going to go, wow, that moth must have had something terribly psychologically wrong with it. Why in the world would it continue to make that mistake until it killed itself? And then secondly, why would every other moth that just witnessed this do the same exact thing? There must be something terribly wrong with this population of moths. But what you have to understand is if you were to pause and consider from a subjective point of view what's taking place inside that animal's mind, is that by messing with the environment, by introducing a supernormal stimulus, a stimulus that was never supposed to be there, that was never supposed to exist, that animal is now going to run the threat of making very poor decisions, potentially even fatal ones, all the while thinking and feeling like it's on the right track. All the while thinking and feeling like this is a very good thing to do, when in fact it's self-destructive. And it will have questions about it. It'll go, if you were to ask it, why are you doing this? It'll go, you know what, I can tell this isn't going well, but every time I do this, it feels so right. I don't understand what's happening. That is exactly what is taking place with the modern food environment. That is exactly what's taking place with the modern drug environment. Now, the reason why one individual might grab a hold of that light more tightly than the other comes back to how many loving and meaningful threads of connection are still attached for that individual. What other reasons does this individual have to show up and be present in their life? If they have a good enough number of reasons to be present in their life, they might go check out that light. It's always going to be attractive. It can't not be. But they know that it takes them out of being present. It removes them from being present in their life. But if there are things in their life that they can show up and be present for that mean the world to them, and they're strongly bonded to them, they can go see that light every now and then, but they'll come back to their life. The more of these that are severed, they now have no reason to do anything but be attracted to the light. And that makes complete psychological sense.
That's incredible. I've never heard that analogy, but I love it. Yeah, it's so spot on. It's
Yeah.
so
I
so
mean, that's the
perfect.
thing. People have to understand your pain makes sense.
Yeah.
You make sense. You are not a broken individual. There's a phenomenal journalist named Johann Hari. He wrote one of the best books on depression and anxiety ever written. It's called Lost Connections. I couldn't recommend this book high enough.
Mm.
He also gave an incredible TED Talk called Everything We Know About Addiction is Wrong. And it's one of the most viewed TED Talks in history. I highly recommend you go watch it. And he has some phenomenal quotes. He says, one that I really, really like is about loneliness, because everybody right now, I think, is dealing with a lot of loneliness. And he says that loneliness is not the physical absence of people. It's the sense that you have nothing of value to share with anyone who matters to you.
Mm.
And so what I think what we're talking about right now is we're seeing a society that has what looks like the most connected we've ever been, right? It looks
Yep.
like we're the most connected we've ever been.
Yeah.
But this is a parody of connection. It isn't real connection. And in fact, it's really difficult on your psychology to tolerate it. So we have a psychology that is really important. We depend on comparison. Anything that you have a sensitivity to is important for your survival, right? So that's why you don't have hunger cues that go from full to starving, right? You notice little subtle changes in your hunger cues, because if you didn't, that could be a risk to your survival. Same thing with temperature change. You don't notice 10-degree temperature changes. You notice what, a degree of temperature, because if you didn't, it would be difficult for your survival. You don't only notice pain when your arm gets cut off. You'll notice a scratch, because if you didn't notice it, that could get infected. That's a problem. It's difficult. It's good for your survival. Turns out what people think about you is important to your survival. If you and I were back in that village, in that tribe, we were within that 100 people, we have a clique of about 4 of us. Every single one of us has a subconscious ranking of each other. And that ranking isn't like who we like the most. That subconscious ranking is who we think has the greatest amount of value that keeps everyone doing better longer, right? And so when we do things and we show these things to people, we get a sense of how valuable we are and the knowledge that we have that helps everyone do better longer, right? And we're really good at comparing ourselves and our behaviors and our knowledge to about 10 to 20 people. Our psychology is really good at that. But now what's happening is We have a generation of kids who are being raised comparing themselves to 10, 20, 100,000 personalities that are not real people in their life. They don't know them. They never will know them. Like when you were growing up and you showed up at school and you wore your hat sideways, and your best friend who knows you knows everything about you, and you know them and know everything about you, go, hey man, listen, dude, turn that thing forward. Bad idea. That looks really terrible. You're not harmed by that. What you know is this is a person who's helping you not lose status amongst the group. This is a person caring for you. And that was okay. That's good. It allowed you to now show up and not be, made fun of. But that's not happening anymore. What we're now getting is kids who are going on to social media and being compared to and insulted by personalities that have no context in their life. And that's really damaging. It's really damaging psychologically. So we don't have a generation of kids that just by nature have worse psychological outcomes. The psychological outcomes we see are the appropriate psychological outcomes to environments gone terribly wrong.
Yeah. Wow. That's I'm having so many revelations in my mind as you're talking. It's so great.
Yeah,
Man, yeah, and that really just goes to show, the importance of, as you've been saying, your environment,
yeah,
like you've surrounded yourself with people that have your best interest at heart,
yes.
Robbie and the other Tara,
Tara,
and yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and your
Robbie,
wife,
Tara,
yeah,
Cyrus.
yeah,
Oh my
Cyrus,
God, my
all
wife.
these guys,
Oh gosh,
yeah,
my wife. Yeah.
right.
Whew.
So yeah, when you've put yourself in that situation, and even going back to Rip, having him
Yeah.
there to
Oh
help you
yeah.
get through that tough time, it's just so important, the people that we surround ourselves, and not only in person, but as you're saying, be conscious of what environments you're putting yourself in online, right?
Yeah.
Because yeah, like you said, that can be damaging, especially for children who don't fully, not that I don't know
Yeah.
that any of us do, but children especially don't fully grasp what that environment even is.
Yeah.
So
Man,
yeah,
it's so funny. I think that, you brought up my wife, and gosh, my wife, Laura, Dr. Laura Goosh, for anybody who wants to know. She's
yeah,
amazing. Um, when people like to comment on like my before and after photos, and I get it, right? Like it's really great. They do well on social media and all that stuff. People think that that's the profound change that makes me love this lifestyle, and it is not. It's great. Like I love being fit. I love not having diseases, sure, right? I love what I can do in the gym. I love what I can do on the trail. I love the knowledge that, I can look down the trajectory of my life. I can see 90 years old and have confidence that there won't be heart disease there. That's fantastic. There's no anxiety when I look down the road of my life in terms of my health. That's a phenomenal thing. But profound change is having spent the majority of your life being told over and over again that you shouldn't love yourself. You really shouldn't. Kids in my school told me that. I thought my parents were telling me that, even though they weren't. I told myself that every day. And then to wake up one day in the presence of the most brilliant, passionate, beautiful woman you've ever met and have her say, I love you so much. You're so worthy of loving that I want to partner my life with you. That is profound change. And I can look at the photos of our wedding and us dancing at our wedding together. And I just think to myself, I cannot believe that I tried to end my life before the best part ever began. And if you're that person who's considering life not being something you want to be a part of, let me tell you, I know exactly what you're thinking and I know exactly what you're feeling. And there are far better solutions for you in making it one more day than there are in ending it right now. I don't know if we get around to. I don't know if we get to go on to another plane of existence and consciousness. I don't know if we get to come back. I consider myself an optimist. I like to think that that's happening for us. But what I'm very aware of is that we all get to experience life on this work or this earth, this world, as the individuals that we are now once. And that is the most precious thing on earth. And trust me, there are people who will greatly miss you. And if you don't love yourself enough yet, believe me, I've been there. I've been at rock bottom. Rock bottom is if you give yourself permission to view it this way, it is a beautiful place. Because rock bottom is the place where you are presented front and center. That if you don't go this direction instead of that direction, it's over. But what you might not be thinking is that it's not just the bad parts that are over, it's all of it. It's all of the unmet potential that you still have. It's all of the I love yous that you haven't heard. It's all of the hugs that you haven't felt. It's all of the things that are still waiting for you that you don't know about. And I just urge you to go one more day, make one more call. I know it's a terrifying, extraordinary thing. And if you are a person who is the recipient of this call, what I beg of you to say, what I beg of you to do is please don't try to solve their problems. Johann Hari, at the end of his talk, Everything We Know About Addiction is Wrong, makes an ask of everybody. He says, if you know someone who's struggling, what I want you to do is I want you to call them and I want you to say, I love you. I love you whether you're using or you're not. I love you whatever state you're in. And if you need me, I will come and sit with you because I don't want you to be alone or feel alone. What he is telling you to do is not try to solve their problems for them, but to remind them that they are a valuable and important part of the goings on of your life. That there is a place within a community of shared respect that is saved just for them. And it can never be replaced. And it is so important that it will always be there. It will always be waiting for them. Whenever they are ready to come back to it, you have to remind someone that they matter the most to people who matter the most to them. That's what I want you to do.
That's beautiful. Yeah, so important for people to hear that and to understand, how to deal with situations like that. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that. Um, I know we're coming up to the top of the hour,
Yeah.
and we didn't really get into Q&A, but I think you probably answered so many questions that people probably have, and I think everything that you shared was just incredible and very valuable. So thank you for doing that.
My
Um,
pleasure.
can you share just where people can find you and, if they want
Yeah.
to follow what you're doing?
Yeah, so go to adamsud.com, and you can see past interviews, YouTube shows. You can email me through there. I have a coaching program for behavior change. You can also find out ways to book me as a speaker to come speak at events. And you can also find me on Instagram at plant-based addict. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to link that down below, and also
Great.
your website, adamsud.com, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
Perfect. Okay. Wow. Well, terrific episode. I'm so glad that I was able to have you on. I'm
me
so
too.
inspired, and I just truly appreciate how you show up in the world, and just everything that you've done to help yourself and help others. So thank you so
Thanks,
much
man.
for,
I
yeah,
really appreciate you.
thank
Yeah.
you so much.
All
All right,
right.
guys. Well, I hope this was as just inspiring for you as it was for me. And thank you so much for being here with us. We will catch you next week, same time, same place. And yeah, look forward to seeing you then. Take care.
Take care.